Hello and welcome to section 5, Visualizing Data with Matplotlib and Seaborn. In this section, we are going to look at creating visualizations using different libraries such as Matplotlib and Seaborn, getting quick graphs by using the pandas plotting capabilities, learn about which types of plots go well with different type of data. The first video is about Matplotlib Introduction. In this video, we are going to learn about Matplotlib. Matplotlib is a low-level graphics library. It gives a large amount of control over the plots. Oftentimes it might be tedious because you have to control everything. It's similar to Matplotlib's graphical plotting library. So we'll start with importing some libraries here. So first import NumPy as MP. We'll also import matplotlib.pyplot as plt. Okay, so this is how Matplotlib graphing library is imported. And then we'll have to use this magic function here, which is matplotlib inline. If you're using Jupyter Notebook, you have to include this in your code, otherwise the graphs will not show up. Okay, so with that said, let's go. So first we'll create an array called x. Okay, and x is a np.linspace. So we'll create equally spaced points, and we'll use np.py times 4. And then we'll create 200 points. Okay, so x looks like this. Equally spaced points between 0 up until 4 times pi, which is, 4 times 3.14, which is about somewhere around 12.56. And then there's 200 points in between. So with that said, we'll also create y, which is np.sign of x. So we'll be taking the sign of the points in x. And if you look at y is like this, okay, the sign function of x. All right, so let's continue. Now we have our points x and we have the function sign x. So by just doing this, plt plot x and y, we'll get a graph out. Okay, so we have the x over here on the x-axis and the y over here on the y-axis. And as you can see, y is the sign of x. Okay, this is the sign function. And we are making 2 cycles here. Now, as you can see, when you do this, it gives you an output like this as well, saying this is a Matplotlib 2D line graph. If you do not want to see this, you'll use plt.show. So plt.show is similar to print function. It will print out the graph. As you can see, you don't see the out here anymore. And that warning or that message is also not shown anymore. You just see the graph, which is better. Now we will continue with this and we'll do some modifications to the plot now. So if we say, for example, it's a good idea to have the x label and the y label. So how do we add that? We'll say x label and we call that x. And then we will also add the y label and we will call that sign of x. Okay, so as you can see now, we have x, the sign of x over here. Another good thing to have is, well, maybe not in this case, because it's clear that we have x and sign x, but if you had several of these, it would be a nice thing to have a legend over here as well, showing which color is which one. Let's do that. For that, we will say plt.legend. Okay, now if you run this, it will complain saying, hey, I don't know what to put in the label. So as you can see, it created a legend here, but it doesn't know what to write there. So for that, while creating the graph here in plt.plot, we'll give the label of this. So we'll say sign of x. Now we have a legend as well. Now we can also change the color of this. So let's say we want a red color. By just putting this R, it makes a red line now. Also, if you want to add several more plots onto the same figure, we can do that. Let's say plt.plot. Let's do something before that. So let's create another one. Z is equal to np.cosine of x. So the y was the sine function, and now we'll have the cosine function drawn, xyz, and we'll make this blue color. Okay, and we'll give the label is equal to cosine of x. And let's see. So this is not correct now, but let's keep it for now. As you can see, now we have 2 functions, the sine and cosine. One, the red is the sine and blue is the cosine. And let's change the y label to fx. Now this is x, this is the fx axis. Okay, so as you can see, you can do many modifications. You can continue with this. You can change the x limits, for example, or the y limits as well. So let's do that as well. plt.xlim. and we can put a list here. Let's say go from 0 up until let's say 6. Let's say this point. If you run this, now we'll see that the x limit go from the x boundaries from 0 to 6. All right. You can control this ticks. You can control the y limits and y labels. You can do much more. The next thing I will show is about creating two subplots next to each other. So we'll use plt.subplot for that. And if you say 1, 2, 1, we are saying we'll create a subplot with 1 row and 2 columns, and we are going to now plot on the first subplot. Okay, that means, so we'll use plt.plot, and we'll say xy, and we'll color it red. And then we'll go to the second one. So plt.subplot, 1 row, 2 columns, and to the second one. Okay, plt.plot xz, and then let's say blue. And if we run this now, we'll get this output. And let's put plt.show again, not to see that message. Okay, so we get this output now, 2 subplots next to each other. The thing is, it's a bit overlap over here happening. It generally using plt.height layout might solve the problem, but in this case, yes, so it does solve the problem. If there's an overlap, it will make it, make the graph nicer. Another way to solve this problem might be to make this graph a little larger. So for that, we'll use plt.figure, and we'll give fixed size. Okay, and we'll say, for example, so the first is the width and the second is the height. Okay, we'll provide 2 arguments here. So let's say 10 and then 8. So it will be quite large now. As you can see, it's a very big, very large plot. Okay, this is much nicer. So you can arrange the size as well with this. And sometimes, changing the size might solve the problem without using tight layout. Let's try whether that's true. Yes. So when you make it larger, you don't need to use tight layout. But it's generally a good idea to always use this so that no overlapping happens at all. Okay. So with that said, there is one more thing that I will show you, and that's this. So we have now used always PLT, and then we have added onto that. So we have used the PLT like in a functional format. We can also use an object-oriented format, and that's like this. So we'll create the figure first, and then we'll add the axis to it. So axis is this, so figure is the whole graph or the whole canvas, and then the axis is where your plot is drawn onto it. Okay, in this case we have 2 axes here, for example, or in this case we have 1 axis here, and this is where the axis is, and the whole thing. So the figure encompasses basically the axis, and then the plot is drawn on top of the axis. Okay, so we'll add axis to this. So to do that, we'll say fig.add axis, and then we'll give the location of the axis. So we'll use 0.1, 0.1, 0.9, 0.9. Okay, so the figure, it goes from 0 to 1 in both directions, and then we are giving the lower left corner here, the lower left corner, meaning x location, and this is the y location, and this is the width, and then this is the height. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Let's make this 0.8, 0.8. Okay, so we have created our empty axis now, and we'll add the plot on top of this. So to do that, you'll say axis, right? This is our now the axis object. So we'll add a plot on top of that. So you'll say axis.plot. So for example, again, xy, and then let's say label is equal to sine of x, and then if you say axis.legend, and if we run this, we'll get the plot out of it, and then we get the legend as well. And if you say plt.show, it won't show that message. So this is another way of creating a plot. So this is an object-oriented way where you first create the figure, and then the axis, and then the plot, and then you continue like in this format. And to add x labels and y labels, you'll use axis.set x label. Okay, and set y label, and you can set title as well with set_title. So that's how the graph is done in an object-oriented way. Okay, so that's it. So we have made an introduction to Matplotlib today. We have learned how to create a graph using PLT commands, and how to modify the graphs, how to make it nicer, how to add legends, x labels and y labels, how to create subplots, and finally how to create a graph in an object-oriented way